The Reserve Bank of New Zealand has announced today that it will keep the official cash rate on hold at 3.25%, but is continuing to foreshadow further interest rate reductions this year. Many New Zealanders will have already experienced cost of living relief as a result of the 2.25 percentage point reduction in the official cash rate that has occurred since August, as they've refixed their mortgages and found more income in their household budgets. However, it's important to note that many are yet to feel the benefits of interest rate reductions that have already occurred, and we expect over the coming months many more will be benefiting. This is important not only for those households with a mortgage who find that cash frees up for other purposes. It's important for local businesses whose locals have more money to spend, and it's important for interest rate sensitive sectors of the economy, including building and construction, who often need lower interest rates in order for their big projects to stack up and get a kick start. We note that the Reserve Bank has been able to deliver a series of interest rate reductions in part because of the government's good fiscal management. We're committed to keeping the fundamentals of our economy in good shape. That means not adding to the flames of inflation with reckless spending, and it also means continuing our work to reduce laws and regulations that add cost and inflationary pressure in our economy. Despite global uncertainty, New Zealand is continuing its economic recovery. We've had 2 quarters of growth above what was forecast. Although we face into economic headwinds, we do so in a stable inflationary environment and with lower interest rates than has been the case for many years. And I am seeing signs of growth across our economy, which is good news for households, businesses, communities who need that relief and need the positive effects that growth brings in terms of income relief and cost of living relief. And I'll leave my comments there.
Are you concerned about inflation ticking up again?
Look, we always want to see inflation kept low, so those upward pressures we do keep an eye on. I note that the Reserve Bank sees both upward and downward pressures over the next few months, and it's important they monitor those closely. Inflation is price increases for everyday Kiwis, and that's why our government has been on such a mission to ensure that our own spending doesn't fuel it.
There are still concerns about the cost of living. There was a protest among farming workers. Are you confident that you've done enough to meet your promise of reducing pressure on the cost of living?
I remain concerned about the cost of living. It's a driving objective for this government to address it, and we know that that will continue to take time. On the one hand, it's about sensible economic management that has meant for the first time we've got inflation back in its band. It was out of band for 3 years, which meant that prices rose very fast and have been baked in at higher levels across the economy. On the other hand, it's about driving income growth, which comes from real economic growth, and we remain focused on that across a number of fronts. In addition, we're taking steps in all of those big areas that add to the household bills. So if you think about housing, we've taken steps to put downward pressure on rents, with rents dropping now in some parts of the country, and we're continuing steps to ensure that houses can be built more cheaply in future. If you think about rates, this is an area that has contributed to recent inflationary pressures, and this is something that we are working on because we're concerned not to have people facing major rates bills. When we look at grocery prices, we will continue our work there to ensure the supermarkets are being held to account and that wherever possible they are passing on good prices to New Zealanders. Every little thing helps. Even cutting red tape on the farm ultimately can translate to lower food prices for New Zealanders. So the cost of living, I wake up thinking about every day, and our government is taking the steps needed to deliver not just tomorrow for tomorrow's headline, but over the medium term for all New Zealand families.
Government spending is still hovering at around 34% of GDP. Is there any room for you to further start reducing that spending? Should we start seeing inflation start ticking back up?
Well, look, I'm pleased that the path we're on is to get that spending down to 30.9% over the next 4 years. We've chosen a gradual course because it is important we continue to provide funding support to critical frontline services, including health, education, our social safety net, and we're conscious that focusing spending in the right places and getting value for it is what New Zealanders want to see.
But if inflation does start heading back up, are you willing to take a more rapid approach to that reducing of spending to 30.9%?
We need to be really careful when we're looking at what's driving inflation to understand the underlying factors. And so I'm not convinced that we are providing stimulus to the economy right now. Treasury's advice to us is that the spending decisions that we made in the budget mean that we're not putting pressure on inflation. In fact, they say that the spending decisions we made in terms of reducing the operating allowance mean that interest rates will track lower than would have otherwise been the case. So I think we're in the right spot. It's certainly the case that if we had chosen a bigger spending budget, we would be actively putting pressure on inflation and interest rates right now, but we've chosen a balanced, steady course.
So the government can't do anything if inflation starts ticking back up?
Well, we will watch it very carefully, and if there are actions we can take, we will take them.
Had you quietly hoped the RBNZ would cut the rate today?
Oh, look, I'm always on the side of New Zealanders who want cheaper mortgages, but I'm also on the side of the Reserve Bank keeping inflation and price increases under control. They make these decisions independently, and I understand that they have a range of factors to weigh up. They will in August come out with a more detailed assessment of the latest economic data, and they continue to indicate there is potential for further rate reductions. I note that the Australians have held their official cash rate at 3.85, despite widely forecasted reductions yesterday. That did not occur. I think partly what you're seeing with central banks around the world is them reacting carefully to global uncertainty and being judicious to ensure that they don't unwittingly set fire to inflation once again. We saw the pain of that after COVID. It wreaked havoc on households, and it's important Reserve Banks do their job.
Yeah, the word uncertainty was mentioned again consistently throughout the Reserve Bank's release. I mean, how hard is it to sort of plot economic reform when there is all this global uncertainty?
This is why it's so important that we drive ahead with economic reform. New Zealand cannot take economic recovery for granted. Gone are the days when we're in a peaceful world where there are tailwinds at our side. Actually, more than ever, we have to make this a competitive place to do business. We need to make this a place where the laws and regulations don't get in the way, that they make it easier for people doing things, making things, building things. And I think over the past 6 years, we had a government that was complacent about economic fundamentals and growth. We now have a government that is very focused on the reforms that will make New Zealand competitive in what is set to remain an uncertain world. We cannot take our economic fundamentals for granted, and this government never will.
Do you have any new tricks up your sleeve when it comes to new initiatives maybe to ease the cost of living pressure on Kiwis?
Well, we will continue to take steps to ease the cost of living. I think about the areas that New Zealanders think about. What are the big bills that you face? Well, it's your housing cost, whether it's your mortgage or your rents. We've made a lot of progress on that front, and we'll continue to make progress on that front. It's your groceries, and I'm continuing work there to ease the way for more competition in the grocery sector. I think about costs such as rates, and we're doing work there to see whether or not we can cap rate increases, which have been astronomical in some parts of the country. We've also delivered some targeted measures, whether it's the Super Gold Card rates relief for superannuitants, whether it's the increases to working for families, payments for lower and middle income families, or whether it's this week's announcement of a boost to family boost, which means that the majority of families with children in early childhood education will now be able to get a rebate of up to 40% of their fees.
Do you think New Zealanders are getting gouged when it comes, especially with the prices we pay for dairy?
Look, I do worry about the cost of butter and milk, and I have noted that Costco, for whatever reason, is able to offer butter at around half the price that you see in our mainstream supermarkets. And that tells me that competition can drive better pricing behaviour. I'm also interested in the role that Fonterra plays in terms of the global dairy prices it's getting and how they translate here at home. I will be meeting with the Fonterra Chief Executive in the next little while to talk to him about what we can do to make sure that New Zealanders have affordable cheese, milk and butter.
Yeah, do you think it is fair that we kind of end up paying the global price when we do have 6 million dairy cows?
Well, what I worry about is when I see that it appears you can get cheaper milk and butter in other countries than here. And as I say, I am going to be talking to Fonterra about what's behind that, because I'm on the side of those New Zealanders who say, well, that doesn't seem quite right.
What realistically could Fonterra do in the situation? I mean, It's just the price of milk, which is determined by the GDT auction and other things.
Look, I accept at a high level that that's the case. When there's a lot of demand for dairy products, the price internationally goes up, and that's reflected here at home. My question is about why sometimes we're seeing cheaper prices in British or Australian supermarkets, and I'm interested to understand how much of that is about the lack of supermarket competition here and how much of that is about the prices that Fonterra is passing through. So those are discussions that I'm continuing, because I know it bothers Kiwis. You know, the cheese scone, the butter on your toast, these are Kiwi essentials, and for many families they're having to substitute, and I think it's important that the benefits of a strong dairy industry are felt by many New Zealanders.
You're not considering any subsidies?
What is the purpose
No.
what is the purpose of the meeting with Fonterra Chief Executive? What's the main purpose of it?
Oh, well, he actually asked to meet with me, and I've indicated that this is one of the issues I wish to discuss.
The supermarket changes that you'll announce later this quarter, how long do you think it will take for those changes to translate into lower food prices for New Zealanders?
Well, I think it will take some time, and I'm realistic about that, because in order for there to be real price pressure on foodstuffs and Woolworths, what we need is competitors in their backyard, and that obviously will take a while for those stores to set up and to be at a scale that really puts pressure on the incumbents. What we know is that when Costco set itself up in Auckland, it actually put pressure on the pricing for all of the surrounding supermarkets. And my concern has been, that's great if you live in that part of Auckland, but what about shoppers in the rest of the country? So we're looking at what we can do to get more supermarkets of competitors open faster, but realistically that's not something that will happen overnight, which is why in the meantime I'm continuing to put the pressure on the big supermarkets already operating to say, at least do your job fairly. When you advertise a price, charge the same price at the aisle. Don't abuse the Fair Trading Act. Make sure that wherever you can, you're passing on lower prices to shoppers.
I'm just curious, Minister, why you called a meeting at 2 o'clock, because we didn't have a chance to digest the statement by then, and neither would you have, unless you got it beforehand.
Look, I'm sorry if you didn't have time to digest the statement. I do always get briefed on the Reserve Bank's decisions ahead of time, and I had time to read their statement ahead of this press conference.
Just on a different matter, the operator of Tuaroa ski field has written to the government asking for further financial assistance, saying there's the ongoing dispute between the Crown and iwi is affecting their viability. I appreciate you won't be across the details, but at a high level, how much appetite is there from the government to provide further financial support to, an important tourism attraction?
Well, obviously the government has taken steps there to ensure that a ski field can remain open on Mount Ruapehu. In particular, the Department of Conservation has progressed work to grant concessions for the use of that land for a ski field, and we have made the provision of Crown lending to ensure that an operator can set up. In terms of the details of the concerns being raised, I'd prefer to get briefed on them before I comment.
And would you be able to comment on the protest that farming workers have done today, and whether they might have a better offer coming?
Look, I haven't seen that, but Farmac workers, like all government workers, are in a constrained environment. New Zealand has been in a significant deficit. We've taken on a huge amount of debt, and like many employers, we're now in a situation where we need to be careful about the pay increases that we offer, and I expect that Farmac is in the same situation.
You reckon Jacinda Ardern should front up to the COVID inquiry?
Well, look, it'll be up to the Royal Commission to decide whether to invite her, but if she were invited, I can't see why she wouldn't want to put her side of the story.
So are you calling on them to ask her and for her to accept?
No, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to make that call on them. That will be their decision to make. I'm simply observing that I can't see why you wouldn't front up to tell your side of the story if you were given that opportunity.
Just a question on potential bank tax, or the work that you're doing to look at banks and taxes. Would you be comfortable applying a levy like the Australian one on the large banks, if that comes on top of the levy that they're paying via the deposit compensation scheme?
Look, as I've said, these are matters that I'm taking advice on, and I don't intend to make more comments until I've considered that advice, made recommendations to Cabinet, and we've taken decisions. Thanks, everyone. Sorry it was a bit early. That was unintentional. It was simply...